What is this half-eaten orange sprue, and why is it so ahead of its time? This, today, and more in the Hobby Corner. Roll that intro. Welcome to Corner Case. You're in the Hobby Corner. I'm your best friend, your Flaming Hot Cheeto, your host, Deck. So what this is a model from Malifaux. It is a fire gammon. Now, if you went to a tournament at any point during second edition, these, depending on how your tournament organizer was running events, were given out as prize support or one form and another. I know different TOs do it different ways. So some, encourage you to come to league night and they'll distribute prizes that way, or some actually do provide these at the tournament itself. At least in our local community, I got this by going to a tournament and placing, I'm guessing, at least good enough to have one. You'll notice that it is chewed up, and that is because I never intended to play these unpainted, so I've been slowly donating these parts to conversions that I've made. Pre-pandemic, every wargame kind of had a strategy for providing custom models or some sort of prize support for going to tournaments. X-Wing back then had its legendary regionals dice. Everybody had those like glittery dice or the metallic dice, and that's how you knew that somebody was good enough to place. Underworlds had the same thing where they were giving out like tokens or custom cards. So all these like cool incentives. Infinity does the tournament pack every season. So you get patches, you get dice, but this right here is a little bit more unique than that. And I didn't realize it at the time, but over time I've come to realize that this actually is a piece to a much bigger picture that I think makes Weird, the classiest, the savviest, and the sexiest wargaming company, in my opinion. So the first reason I think this is pretty cool, and I might be off base by calling this out, but we were all thinking it. Usually wargamers are either more interested in the hobby or they're more interested in gaming. That's the nice way of saying it. What I mean is people who are good at playing usually suck at painting, let's be honest. If you're at the top of your tournament, it is very rare that you're like the best painter in your group. And in some cases, you might have just barely got there in terms of what tournament legal means. So providing these models that are actually just a custom color, and actually, if I'm not wrong, in the tournament rules, they encourage, if you have these models, you can tournament legal them without any paint. And of course, they did sell like the whole boxes of custom colored crew boxes. Like there's the Dayglow, and Rasputina has the translucent blue box. They did provide those, but specifically these tournament support prizes were just individual models and you could play them, not painted. So I think that on its own is really, really cool because, for example, Games Workshop will provide, this is not a salt video, Games Workshop will provide the easy to build kits with the colored plastic. So you can buy those Space Marine heroes. They'll be easy to build. Back in the day, I remember buying a easy to build the Nurgle tank, and those I think create like a certain connotation. So you have this colored plastic. It means that it's like from an easy to build kit. You know it if it's unpainted, and realistically they don't encourage you to play it unpainted. But this is a completely different context. You went to a store, you met with a group, played a game, and for some reason or another you were either very good at the game or you showed up consistently or whatever. This is a merit prize. You receive this by your merit and you're encouraged to play it, and it's now your trophy. And that's super cool by itself. Very small difference in context makes all the difference to the meaning of this product. Now, realistically, the best situation is you just show up to play with like a fully painted army, like all your models are painted to a good standard, and that's like really immersive. But I think this solution is, as a prize support, is actually a little bit more honest about our reality. We don't always show up fully painted, and I think for those of us who just like to play a lot more, this really encourages us to keep playing and not feel ashamed about, unpainted models, because now you have some that are supposed to be unpainted. Another big reason I think this is super cool is I think many of the wargaming companies are doing their best to learn from the video game industry right now. I don't always agree that they're taking the right learnings, but in this case, Weird was doing this more than 5 years ago already. So that's why I think it's kind of ahead of its time. I have friends who have kids who have spent hundreds of dollars on Fortnite skins. You can do just a little bit of digging and see that Roblox has an entire aftermarket, some would call it a black market or stock market of collectible personalization. And so people take a lot of joy out of the collecting component of any hobby, the personalization component of any hobby. Now, I think it's easy for wargaming companies to assume that the entire hobby is just skins because you buy a model and then you paint it whatever you like. But that's not the same thing as an object of desire or collectability, collecting that personalization. There is a thrill of the hunt type of mentality or enjoyment that comes from collecting. Most wargaming companies address this collectible personalization with custom sculpts. So Games Workshop has 1 million Primaris Lieutenants. Infinity does a really good job where, especially in the last like 3 or 4 years, I really want some of those limited edition sculpts that they don't sell anymore, or that I don't have access to. But not only does Weird, I think, do that the best in terms of alternate sculpts, but they also provide these custom colored models. Now, what does that do? That creates this like thriving ecosystem of collectible personalization. Because think about it, because they don't have to build a new tooling to make this product, because they're just shooting any existing model in any color they want, technically any faction, any model is eligible for this type of skin. Versus if you're just waiting for the next Primaris custom lieutenant to come out, that's not necessarily addressing the player base at large. So this actually addresses the entire player base because any faction you play can have these custom colored models, which I think is pretty sick, in addition to the limited sculpts. So I remember at the height of popularity of M2E that some of these custom sculpts or limited sculpts were going for like crazy amounts on eBay. Like I remember the Gen Con Mysterious model was like, I think like $75 to $90 just for the one like mini sprue on eBay at any given moment. And so that was pretty crazy. And the first thing you might think of is like, oh, well, scalpers kind of make our hobby shitty. But that wasn't actually the case because the method for distribution of these custom models was mostly hand to hand. So you go to Gen Con and you get this model, you go to a tournament and you get this model. And in some cases, that orange sprue that I showed you, you can't just like buy that necessarily. Like I think at the Black Friday sale this year, I saw all the Dayglow sculpts, but they don't necessarily sell every custom color sprue that they made for tournament support. So potentially there's models out there that have never been sold before and never will. And that creates like a really cool, thriving ecosystem that only happens because they did that. And so you have these tiers. You have this like A tier of like completely reimagined alternate sculpt, Mayfang 1988 or Wild Ones McCabe. So completely different from the original model. You have your alternate pose. So your alternate Karis. You have your vintage pose. And then you have your tournament prize support pack custom color models. You have all these different tiers of personalization, collectible skins that have a different access and acquiring method. And that is just like what was super, super cool. So if we ever make it out of this into regular tournaments again, I would love to see this ecosystem just come back online, just be booming again, because it was so, so good for the hobby. Both painters, collectors, players, everybody, this is the coolest thing. Very appropriate for the modern man. And so I was thinking about this too, like because they can just use any existing model in production and shoot it in a special color. So I don't know if they did this, but it would be so cool if they, just like you had a 1 in 10 chance, like a blind box, like 1 in 10 chance of any box you buy is just a special colorway. And I know that would be more expensive for them, at least like in the business that I'm in. If I order color samples from the factory, if I'm ordering less than MOQ, they could charge me like $50 to $100 for a piece of plastic that is roughly the size of a sprue, versus in production, it's a fraction of that price because of the operational efficiencies they get by operating at scale, shooting injection molding thousands of units. So it would be quite pricey for them, I imagine, to do that type of play, but that would be so cool, is if just like you open up, you just think you're buying like a Rasputina box, it's always going to be her, and you just get one that's like a different blue. And they can do different versions, like you can get the 1 in 10 chance light blue Rasputina sprue versus go to the tournament and win snow white Rasputina sprue, for example. There's so many things you can do with this idea that potentially, might cost the company more, but not, I think, that much more. So yeah, just super, super stoked. Maybe one day we'll go back to tournaments again. And I guess that's what this is really about, is just nostalgia, but also like a cool thing. Again, shout out to Weird for being way ahead of their time. And by way ahead of their time, I mean the right time for the modern man and woman and weirdo. Those are my thoughts on collectible skins and wargaming. And one example that I think was really, really good. Please like and subscribe to the channel. We are desperate. Thanks for swinging by, and we'll see you next time.
Venerate the Emperor by subscribing now! Only in death does subscribing end!